Just one more minute in here, we'll get started.
Okay.
All right, I think we're ready to go. I think some people are about ready to hop on the stream here.
Okay.
So I just want to say good afternoon to everybody that's able to join us. My name is Jordan Bishop. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Interfaith Network. I hope everybody's doing well and is in good health. I want to thanks for joining us today as we have a conversation with Deacon Mike Leman. Before we get started, I want to invite you to join us again next Wednesday, May 5th at 1 p.m. as we talk with Representative Sarah Burlingame, the Executive Director of Wyoming Equality. And then again on May 14th as I talk with the First Lady of Wyoming, Jenny Gordon, and her work with the Wyoming Hunger Initiative. But today we have a great guest. His name is Mike Leman. He's the legislative liaison for the Catholic Diocese of Cheyenne, and he's a leader in the campaign to end the death penalty in Wyoming. So Mike, how are you and your family? How have you been doing recently?
We're doing good. Jordan, thanks for having us on. We've been hunkered down. Kind of mentioned to you at the start when we got on our challenge with four of us in our family. I got two teachers here and a freshman in high school and myself. And so our big challenge is trying to find a vacant room to do Zoom calls and these other things like everybody else is trying to learn how to do. But we are very blessed and healthy and are able to keep safe and so very fortunate.
For sure. Yeah, I feel the same way. I definitely, one thing that I've been doing this time more than I found myself previously is definitely being grateful the things that I have and the situation that I'm in. So Mike, we really haven't known each other for too long, but we've done a little bit of work together on the Wyoming campaign to end the death penalty last year, moving into this year with a budget session. Could you just explain a little bit about the campaign or the repeal movement for the death penalty in Wyoming?
Absolutely. So I just to share this, I began working for the diocese in 2015. But before that, I think, obviously you and probably many people are aware that the Wyoming Interfaith Network, or formerly the Wyoming Association of Churches, was instrumental in working for repeal of the death penalty for years. And we're instrumental also in bringing legislation that allowed for life without parole, which was a huge step at the time. And so it's something that's been going on for quite a while. I do know that for years and years, a repeal bill has been brought and typically never made it even to committee. Never allowed to come up for introduction, as we kind of more conservative leadership would prevent that from happening. 2015, my first year on, started sort of reaching out on this and obviously other issues as well. And then I'm trying to remember exactly when Sabrina King started, I think it was maybe 2016 or maybe 2017. But she was somebody that came in very much interested. Working for the ACLU to get involved in this, and so we started just having face-to-face conversations with legislators. Representative Jared Olson, Senator Brian Boner, the two sponsors the last 2 years, primary sponsors of this bill, and then working with the Wyoming League of Women Voters also. Father Christopher Xanthos, who was formerly the pastor at Holy Apostles Orthodox, now at Saints Constantine and Helen Orthodox Church. He was another person that was very instrumental. And then this last year, the conservatives concerned about the death penalty. And I know members of the Wyoming Interfaith Network throughout this whole thing too have been instrumental in working and contacting folks as well. So it's a really diverse group. It's I mentioned to you before, it's been an extremely fun project just because we may not all even agree why it should be repealed, but we all agree on that fact. And so that's a little bit of the context that I've seen.
Yeah. So, I mean, just as even as you kind of explaining all of the players that are kind of in this campaign, I mean, we're talking about people that identify as Republican, Democrat, religious, non-religious, liberal, conservative. It's a really broad and diverse group of people that are working on this campaign. What is it about this issue that is able to attract such a diverse group of people to work together?
That's a good question. I mean, I think fundamentally we're talking about the human person. Obviously, we're talking about the role of the state, its responsibilities, all of these things. And to me, when I look at some of the conservative circles where the discussion has been furthered a little bit, that's kind of the question. For us, we talk about the sacredness of human life. Whenever anybody would bring up the death penalty, then all of a sudden there's a little bit of backpedaling and like, well, now we're qualifying what makes a life sacred. And for us to be able to say, well, no, once we start qualifying something, we're kind of undermining the idea that it's sacred in the first place. The idea of sacred is that I don't get to determine it. It is something beyond. And between also religious freedom concerns, and really taking a deep look at the role of the state. Obviously, the state has a huge responsibility to keep society safe, and to the extent that we're able to do that with technology and with our advancement of our maximum security prisons, then it's like, okay, well, now how does this work? And we're very concerned about state overstepping its boundaries and impeding religious freedom. But what about the freedom that underlies even religious freedom? That right to life, if you take away the life, and so there's a lot of these questions, I think, that we're hoping to continue among conservatives as well, and so I think that's one of the helps that's been able to advance at least that side of it. I think a lot of the folks on the left have seen that for a while, and so we're hoping to keep that platform of discussing, the mystery of human life
Right.
across the board.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've noticed is, people may come to the table to work on death penalty repeal for a whole bunch of different reasons. It may be because of sanctity of life. It may be because it discriminates based on race or income. It may be all of these reasons, right? But the fact that we can really all come together on one issue, on common ground, and work together has been awesome to see. And to me, really, that's what interfaith work is all about, is coming across lines of difference to work together on the issues that matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also the role of debate, right? I mean, legislator or advocacy for legislation always entails, injecting just a little bit of reality into the debate, because we can get so conceptual with all of these things, and helping people recognize, yes, families of victims, obviously, right? I mean, when we can't discuss it without thinking about that, without building solidarity with them and thinking through, really, what is justice? Right. What does justice look like in this particular setting? But also on the other side of it, looking at, like, okay, what does it look like to execute somebody? Have you ever seen anybody who is, been died of a violent crime? Because it's, and to me, that's where I pull back a little bit on my experience as a firefighter. And not that I saw, massive death everywhere I went, but I did see crimes of violence. I have seen people die from violence trying to administer CPR, and never once across my mind did I ever think, oh, I wonder if this one deserved it or not. And to paint a little bit more vivid picture for us to think about, so that our debates among these difficult issues don't just remain in the conceptual sort of realm, that we bring them down to earth a little bit. But.
So you as a person of faith, I mean, you're a deacon, you're Roman Catholic, part of the Diocese of Cheyenne. What is it from your faith that compels you or motivates you to want to seek repeal of the death penalty?
Well, I guess I would, I'd fall back a little bit to I got my undergraduate degree in English, and which not only shocked all of my high school English teachers, it blew me away too that I would ever be into that. But I love the philosophy, right? And so I kind of got into literature, and you still sort of go into this stuff, which was not easy for me to weigh into. It's just not a natural thing for me to weigh into literature. But I was so struck by the fact that, when you go into criticism of literature, and you start looking at the work, you learn so much about the author. And I think as people of faith, we understand that we, human beings and all of creation, we can't say anything about it without making some implication about the creator. And so to the extent where we're saying, well, in this circumstance, we can just throw away life, or the state has a right to kill somebody because of this X, Y, or Z, we're saying something very profound about who God is, and we need to think that through. I think as a people of faith, we really need to think about what we're saying based upon the policies that we're forwarding or that we're allowing to continue. So I do think there is a need for deep discussion among people of faith about the implications. What we say about creation says a lot about who the creator is. So what do you propose that communities of faith do? How do we have these discussions? How do we get involved, get knowledgeable about the issues, and take action on something like death penalty repeal in Wyoming? That's the $1 million question, right? I mean, it's so challenging. As somebody that's been at this for 4 or 5 years and trying to get folks involved, it's always interesting to me when I have Catholics come up and say, well, the church shouldn't be involved in politics. And then I'll say, well, which issue are you talking about? And they'll lay out whatever. I'll say, well, what about this other one? Well, it's fine if the church says something about that. what they're really saying is, don't affect my politics. Right? Don't challenge my way of thinking. And I completely understand that. But I think we as faith leaders need to first and foremost model dialogue, model debate. But before that, we have to overcome our fear, right? I mean, I tell you, when I speak in front of Catholics, and I speak on issues that span the left and the right, I know I'm going to really make somebody's blood boil. And that's not my goal, right? My goal is to allow us to enter into a deeper discussion about these things. But what I've found is that it is possible, right? It is possible to do this. Yeah, sometimes you're gonna hit a button on somebody and they'll let you know about it. But I think if you can build the trust that you're listening, somebody that I admire, and don't ask me any questions about St. Thomas Aquinas because I'm not an expert, but I love. I mean, he was such a master theologian. He could have probably stomped all over people, right? But that's not how he did it. He did not straw man. He didn't try to make people look stupid. He took the argument from their side and he made it as strong as he could, and he presented it. And then he went and explained why he believed they were wrong. And he totally, you know what I mean? But it showed the dignity that he saw in that other person. I'm not here to destroy you or to make you look foolish so I can make my own argument look better.
Yeah, he did it with a certain sense of humanity, it sounds like.
Absolutely. That's the model, I think. And I am certainly a long ways from getting there, but I think it's a great thing to strive for.
So where does that start? Where does that conversation? I mean, does that start in? I mean, if you're after church, or does that start just in a conversation if you're in a book group together? Where do these conversations start, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. Among the church, the Catholic Church, I've been trying to initiate some of those with the pastors, and that's, and a lot of them are open to it, and some of them I think are pretty nervous, and it's totally understandable. But I guess depending upon the community, I honestly, I think it starts in the family,
Yeah.
and that's scary, right? I mean, there's nothing more terrifying than thinking, well, should I talk politics? But maybe it begins with question. I think it begins with a recognition that I don't have to win an argument to,
Right.
to speak what's on my heart and what I think. But
For sure.
so,
Yeah, I think having those, I very much hesitate to use the word safe space because I know that's been politicized in some ways, but to have a space where you're not going to be demonized for having a certain view, and that you can kind of speak your mind. And I mean, for me personally, I have to talk through an issue. Even if I'm doing something like fixing my bike, like I have to like talk through, okay, how am I going to do it? What tools do I need? And so I definitely do that when I'm looking at like larger issues like this. Is I need a space, and luckily I have my wife where I can really kind of talk through these issues and work out how I'm feeling about it, kind of like the ethics of it in regarding to my religious tradition. And
right.
so I just think hopefully something that can come out of the Wyoming campaign and the death penalty is that we prompt those conversations, and that we can provide a model and maybe some spaces for those conversations as well.
I agree, and I hear what you're saying about the safe space thing, and my thinking on it has changed a little bit, as I think about sort of the social media or the cancel culture, right? Where you post something, and suddenly you're publicly humiliated and mocked and gone after. That is the opposite of safe space. So I sort of recognize it and am a little more sympathetic to the idea of it. I think it's deadly for learning to say, well, this is a safe space, so we can't. But I sort of understand maybe where some of this is coming from, and I think this is why it's so critical. I mean, living in a country where our fundamental freedom of speech is protected, that has to be protected in order for us to grow, right? And I know, some of the listeners may not be huge fans of Jordan Peterson, but one thing that he talks about is free speech, the importance of free speech. And I love that he says you have to be able to risk saying something stupid because then somebody else can come in and say, well, maybe you haven't thought this all the way through, and give you a fuller perspective. That's called learning, right? But if you feel like if I say the wrong thing, suddenly I'm going to be, destroyed on social media or whatever they want to call it, that is the opposite of safe space, and so I think that's where, my gosh, it takes a lot of courage, and as faith leaders, we can go a long way to help people, but it is a risk. There's no doubt.
Right. For sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a risk worth taking, because I feel like this is an issue in particular that, I mean, we can tackle this issue from many angles. We can talk about it, as I mentioned earlier, being discriminatory based on race or income, or whether you want to look at it from like a fiscal conservative perspective of it, that it's, I mean, wasting $1 million a year in Wyoming, for the fact that it's an ineffective program, that it's government overreach. I mean, there's a lot of issues that we could go around and talking about the death penalty. So there's, I feel like I bring that up to say it's really important to talk about it, because it affects a lot of different areas that touch maybe some people in different ways than others. So. Well, we're almost out of our time today, Mike. Before you head, I wanted to ask you if you could share something from, it can be religious or not, share something that has given you hope or strength during this time of the pandemic that's been a struggle for everybody in the last, oh gosh, feels like 3 years, but I think a month and a half now.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, one of the things is looking at our Christian history, a long span of history, and gosh, recognizing there was so many times and so many problems and so many places throughout where their faith was really challenged. It was very difficult. And we've seen that even looking back on the flu pandemic, right? I mean, even here in Cheyenne, and people not being able to go to mass, and it gives you a little bit bigger context for realizing that God never abandons us. And the other thing for me, on a more specific level, has been just sort of thinking a little bit about Saint Therese of Lisieux, who is very simple. The little flower. She looked up to all these great saints, and she thought, I can never be anything like that or do anything like that. But she created the little way, offering up the little things. And gosh, you look out, especially when you're working on these seemingly large issues of advocacy like we're involved in, right? And the problems of the world. And then this pandemic comes in, and you go, we need big saints, Lord. We need something really big right now. And it's a reminder of like, oh no, actually what we need are humble ones that aren't too proud to call the neighbor next door or do the little things that make all the difference in the world. And to me, that's been helpful to me, because I like the big picture stuff. I kind of can live in that world for a while. Sure. But when you're in a pandemic or trying times, it can get overwhelming. So those are two little things. And I think the history thing, I mean, that could be helpful for people of no faith as well, is just to look at what the human spirit has overcome.
Right.
And
yeah, that's awesome. I really like the focusing on the small things and being grateful for that. Something we talked about previously as well. So,
Yep.
Well, thanks so much today. I really appreciate you taking the time out and talking with me. I want to encourage everybody to stay connected with the Wyoming Campaign to End the Death Penalty 2021. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram. As the year goes on, there will be more events and opportunities to learn and connect. Mike, thanks for joining me today. I look forward to working together in the future, and hopefully it's not too long before we can get together in person.
That'd be great, Jordan. Thank you very much for doing this and all you're doing. And I want to thank the Wyoming Interfaith Network also. God bless you, and stay safe.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks.